Hello, and welcome to the M4 podcast. My name is Craig Hamer. Today on the podcast, we have Miguel Castillo from Spain. Miguel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Craig.
Miguel, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about where'd you grow up, what was your family like, and how did you meet Jesus?
Yes, was born and raised in Monterrey, Mexico, just north of Mexico, south of Texas. I was the second of five siblings. My parents are both from the north of Mexico as well. They raised us in the Baptist church. We went to the Baptist church when I was early in my 5-6-year-old. And then my dad is a business guy. He's an entrepreneur. My two grandparents, my dad as well. My mom took care of us and raised us, five of us. Just imagine 4 guys and 1 girl in the middle. And had a very loving upbringing in my family. Mom and dad that really poured into us. It was not until my last year in the university. I think it was I was 15 or 16 and I left the church. I always say that I learned the Bible stories at church growing up, Sunday school in a Baptist church, which was very, very much a value. But it was not until my last year in the university that I ran into a friend that had basically experienced a radical encounter with Jesus. I had not seen him in a couple of years, but I ran into him and we were talking. I was already impressed by his radical transformation. And on top of that, he takes me to the scriptures in Philippians 3. And he basically asked me a question. And he said, "You're about to graduate from university. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, together with a group of friends, we're going to pursue a political career. One, my friend is going to be a president. I'm going to be the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Another one is going to be Secretary of Defense." And we went on, and he just kept on probing. And he said, look at this. I want to show you something I'm reading lately. And he opens up the word Philippians 3. And he basically reads through it, Paul's resume. Hebrew of Hebrews, the tribe of Benjamin, blameless in terms of the law. And he says, look at this. Paul could have been president of Israel. He spoke different languages, but he said he had all those accomplishments as rubbish when he compared them to Christ, to following Christ. And I remember that he even explained what rubbish meant. He said, that word that means skubala. And I even remember reading through that, and I said, Gerardo was his name, but we call him Jerry. And I said, I don't remember understanding the scriptures this clearly. And he said, that's because the Holy Spirit is helping you understand it. So even that was crazy. But I remember that afternoon in my heart saying and thinking, I want to follow this Jesus that Paul is talking about. So I always say it was back 22-year-old, last year of my university in Monterrey. That's how I gave my life to Christ.
So tell me a little bit about your ministry journey from that coming to Christ,
yes,
and then getting into ministry and to where you are today.
I always say, looking back, that it was from day one. I was called almost like Paul falling on the way to Damascus to the ground, because it was maybe not day 2, but day 3. I was already in a Bible study. Day 5, we were praying for the terminal sick in the hospitals. Day 10, we were doing evangelism on different squares in Monterrey. On the weekends, we were on a dynamic where we were visiting the marginalized areas where a lot of drug addicts used to gather. And we would just love on them and bring them hot chocolate. It was around winter at that time, and things like that. And I was discipled from day 1. That I can tell you, from day 1 I was discipled. Gerardo took me under his wing. Every Friday, every Monday, we would have Bible studies, and there was a Bible teacher that would just open the scriptures, and they would just come alive. And I was serving from day 1. So I always say my ministry journey started right there. fast forward, I found myself, I know now that I was part of a church plant, but I didn't know then. But my first years were really part of the beginnings of a new faith community that was being birthed with this group that I was telling you, with Gerardo, and there were several doctors in the city and several professionals, young professionals. And I remember young professionals that I knew from high school or from the university that were having radical encounters with Jesus, and they were serving as well, and that was very impactful for me. And very soon I realized, just by observation, that I come from a church that was very strong on Bible stories, but they were not very strong on passion. Passion in worship, passion in sharing your faith. And here I am, a few years later, on the other side. Yes, there was depth, but not as much as I saw over there on the scriptures. But there was one thing. I saw passion for worship and passion for sharing your faith with others and making disciples. So I realized I want to do this for the rest of my life. And exactly what I was thinking, I believe there is a need for what I thought or called back in the day balanced churches, where there is depth in the scriptures, but there's also passion on worship and sharing your faith. So basically, in the last 25 plus years, I've been involved in different church planting projects and also helping others plant churches, giving my life really to making disciples and planting churches.
And discipleship is something that's very important to you, as well as coaching, which is in some way quite connected with discipleship. Tell me a little bit about your heart for that, discipleship and coaching.
Yes, I think, Craig, since I was discipled and really invested on by these 2-3 men that came around us, and these families that came around us. We were young, 22. Others in the group were 24, 18, around that range. And it really impacted me, the power that had in my life, and the difference that it made in my life. So I think from then I was really marked by that very fact. I want to do what these guys are doing with us for the rest of my life. I remember visualizing that.
Yeah.
So I think discipleship from the very beginning has been there. Every place I have lived, Monterrey, and then I went to Texas to go to school there, and then I went and helped and was part of a team planting a church in the United States, in the state of Arkansas, and then moved to Spain and arrived in Barcelona. Every time I came to a new place, I was always praying, Lord, where are those young men that you want me to pour into and to disciple? So then fast forward, I come to a point where coaching comes into the picture, because all this time I've been helping plant churches or leading church planting efforts. And there's a really interesting story, Craig. You probably don't know this, but my wife and I came to a point after a church planting project that we led in Madrid. It was called Oikos Project because it was very focused on house churches in different neighborhoods of the city of Madrid. It came to a point 4.5 years into it that we were left without a team. We started with a team, but we were left without a team. The Lehman Brothers crisis, financial crisis, was in the aftermath of that. And a couple went to Germany for work. Another couple decided they wanted to join an existing church, and we were left there. And my wife said, if we continue to go forward, we're going to burn out. Long story short, we decided to fold We did see people come to Christ during those 4.5 years. We saw a couple of baptisms, but we decided to encourage people to join different churches at that moment, and we needed a break. And it didn't stay there. We actually didn't even put church planting on the shelf. We buried it.
Mm.
So what happens? A guy, a mentor we had at that time, my wife and I, he came to us and says, "Okay, you're not done. You're done with church planting." We said, "Yes, we are done with church planting, but you're not done with Jesus." "Oh no, we're not done with Jesus at all. He's not done with us. We're not done with him." And he said, "And you're not done with ministry." "Oh no, we want to serve him for the rest of our lives." And so he encouraged us. He says, "Find a passion that is really, really close to your heart and ask the Lord, use this passion for your purposes." And we decided to go Marketplace Ministries. My wife has a passion for textile art and for fashion. So she decided to get a training on pattern making, and the Lord is using her till this day in that.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, "What's your passion, Miguel?" I remember saying, "Wine. I have a passion for wine." He said, "Miguel, we're talking ministry here. Think about something else." And I said, "Okay, people development. I love people, and I love to see people move from point A to point B in their walk with Christ, in their leadership capacities, especially younger people."
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting. He said, "Have you ever considered coaching?" This was about 13 years ago. "What do you mean?" I said, "Sports? No. Coaching business guys, coaching entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
coaching executives." And I said, "No, I've never considered it." So that started my whole journey with coaching, because I ended up getting a formal training.
Mm-hmm.
I got certified by the International Coaching Federation. And a few weeks into that, Theo Bunescu, does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Theo Bunescu knocks at my door at the office where I was being a coach, working as a part-time coach. It was a digital marketing agency in Madrid. And he basically comes with another good friend, Mark Johnson, and they say, "We want to have a coffee with you. M4 is about to start in Spain next year, and we're looking for coaches." And you know the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been a coach and a trainer of coaches within the M4 ecosystem. And I really have seen how coaching has basically almost expanded the capacity,
Mm-hmm.
but also multiplied the impact of my discipleship, but not only my discipleship, but also how to empower others to make disciples. So I think your question is really good,
Mm.
Craig, because I think I see it like a two sides of a coin, of the
Mhm.
same coin,
Mm-hmm.
which is, people development or leader development, where discipleship comes in, but then coaching comes and just multiplies the impact.
Mm-hmm. And that idea with multiplication, you've now planted churches or been a part of church plants in 3 different countries. How have you seen in the different contexts church planting and multiplication work in those places?
Good question. Mexico, as I said, it was a new reality. I had no categories for church planting, for multiplication.
Mm-hmm.
We were just seeing people come to Christ. It was a very organic. Holy Spirit was on the move, and we were seeing people come to Christ. We were helping people come to Christ, and the Lord was using us. And I think because we didn't know exactly what we were doing, the Lord ended up leading us to join other people and other groups
Mhm.
that were a little bit ahead in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up plugging into different other groups. But what I can say about Latin America, Mexico, and my reality at that time, it we're experiencing an awakening. I think it's already about a 30 or 40-year-old
Mhm.
awakening or revival that's going on in Mexico, Latin America. And I think that's part of a very key part of the dynamic that goes on there when we're looking at church planting. And it facilitates, because really your role is really just listen to what the Holy Spirit is doing, listen to how where people are hurting, and in a way, those two principles really apply
Everywhere.
across the board,
Mhm.
everywhere. Um, Speaking of the church planting experience in the U.S., what that provided to me, it's probably more that what did each experience provided
Mhm.
on my development, and I would say a very a keen sensitivity to the Holy Spirit from the get go in the Mexico church planting experience, and then in the U.S. it was really good because I went through a residency program, a 1 year residency program, which I'm very thankful to till this day. It was Fellowship Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, which has a 1 year residency where they bring in a group, a cohort of 4, 5, 6
Mhm.
couples, teams, really, that want to go and plant a church. And I was part of that. And I learned a lot of principles about church planting. It was
Mhm.
more a strategy. It was more about the importance of team, even back in the day, and I think it was just a lot of framework, a lot of categories, a lot of strategy coming together to how to get structure. So by the time we were planting that church in Arkansas, it was very structured. We started with a core group. There was the phases. We worked towards a launch
Mhm.
date, which was a year out almost. I remember I was involved at that time of helping recruit small group leaders and also helping out with the youth. And then that church ended up sending me to Spain to
Mm.
to to be a
Okay.
missionary in Spain. That became my sending church at that time. The experience in Spain. There's two. There, I've always said when Teo came and knocked at my door and said, "Hey, we're looking for coaches." I said, "Well, what are you looking for?" And he said, him and Mark said, "Well, we're looking for somebody that has some basic training on coaching." I said, "I have that."
Mhm.
And some experience on church planting. I said, well, there I'm a failure. And
Uh-huh.
then they said, even better, because that way you can also bring that experience of what not to do,
Mhm.
as opposed as only all these things you
Mhm.
should do.
Yeah,
No?
the to-do list. Do, and it'll go
Exactly,
well. It's like you have a different
exactly.
view.
So at that time, I was we were coming out of that time, that season with my wife, where we had basically crashed and almost burned out. By the grace of God, we stayed afloat, and we were able to recover from that and get better and be part of the church planting project that we are part of now.
Mhm.
But at that time, I think the importance of team, but also knowing your role,
Mm.
um, and the type of leader that God has made you. How important that is. And I think I have learned through the years. I think I've known it from
Mhm.
very early years, but
Mhm.
it took me years to embrace it. I'm more of a Barnabas. I'm more
Mhm.
for support, a strong support shepherding role.
Mhm.
Actually, in the APEST, if you were looking at the
Yeah.
five ministries in Ephesians 4, I'm definitely a shepherd. A
Mhm.
shepherd, I would say, off the charts.
Mhm.
I cannot not be in an apostolic ecosystem,
Mhm.
and I've always thought that comes from my upbringing.
Mhm.
My two grandparents are entrepreneurs. My dad was an entrepreneur. My older brother was an entrepreneur. So I think I have to be in something that is initiating and activating.
Mhm.
But really, when it comes to leading a church planting effort, I have realized, and I have come to embrace, that I come alongside in a better place, and it's more who I am and who
Yeah.
God made me to be. So I learned that. And then this project we are a part of now,
Yeah. Tell me a bit about Elon Church in Madrid.
yes, Elan Church is a 5.5-year-old church planting project. It is a
Mhm.
project that started through the M14 process 5.5 years ago. And lo and behold, I was actually assigned as a coach to this team.
Okay. And did you know them before you were a coach?
I actually did.
Mhm.
I actually did. Some a friend in common connected the planter and his wife to me back in the day,
Mhm.
and we had really good chemistry, really good connection. I always say it was love at first sight with,
Mhm.
with this guy who I love, and we love working together. And so I was their coach for
Mhm.
2 years.
Mhm.
And I remember towards the end of the team process, his brother Ruben kept on saying, Miguel, so when are you and Hilaria joining us
Mhm.
and be part of the team? Ruben, this is conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I'm a coach for M4. You guys are a church planting team. And I remember thinking and looking at them from a distance, saying, man, this is so cool. You know, the way they're thinking, the way they're planning, the way they're depending on God. Long story short, team process ends. My wife and I come and say, hey, oh, because we had, back in the day, we said, we will never lead a church planting project again.
Mm.
And we will never be part of a church planting project again unless we get invited.
Uh-huh.
And the Holy Spirit confirms it. So there was a little bit of an invitation there by Ruben.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I sat down and she said, well, but we're not getting a formal invitation. Anyways, we get invited and we have been part officially from the executive team within the executive team for I think 3 years now.
Mm-hmm. So quite a while.
2.5, 3 years now. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the church planting project is going really well. The team, when it went through team process, it was 6 or 7 of them
Mhm.
in the core team. Right now, we are a group, a vibrant group of about 65 to
Mhm.
70 people.
Okay.
We have seen people come to Christ, which we were very encouraged.
What's the dream and vision for the church?
The dream and vision is we have a very strong calling. Well, our mission is to propel people into a transforming relationship with Christ.
Mhm.
So it's Elan actually means impulse in French.
Okay.
So it's a way of using a unique name, but also helping provoke or strike up a conversation. Well, what's Elan? You know, and it brings again and again a conversation of what's Elan. And Elan basically means to impulse or to propel someone into an activation of something, something positive, like a petit élan. I think it's in French, which is like a small impulse or like a small jump.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing people. So that's our mission, to propel people into a transforming relationship with Jesus. We have a vocation for the north of Madrid. Madrid is a city of about 7 million people.
Wow. That's big.
And if you look at Madrid, there's a Gran Via, which is the main street that crosses the downtown. About 80 to 85% of the evangelical churches are south of Gran Via. And about 15% are north of Gran Via. But as you go north, less and less churches in the north.
Wow.
So we have a strong calling to populate with the gospel, with Christian witness, the north of Madrid. That's part of the dream. And then another part of the dream is that we want to influence the sectors of society. We want to be a church that yes, we come and are gathered and celebrate weekly or regularly, but we want to be a church that is definitely scattered and being also a light in every sector of society. We have within the 60 to 70 people that we conform Elan Church today, we have a good group of number of artists and creatives. We have a good number of teachers and professors at a university, or people that work in different universities. And then we also have a good group of business guys. So we believe these 3 sectors. And we also have people, at least about 4 or 5 people that are in the social justice sector of some sort. Working with women coming out of difficult situations, working with young immigrants, working with providing housing to people that are homeless or in a situation of homelessness in the city. So we want to influence the sectors, the organic sectors that are already represented in our church, but definitely have a very intentional, be a very intentional light and witness with the gospel in those places.
Wow.
We want to multiply also.
Mhm.
We are right now in a phase. We had to leave the place where we were meeting, so we are right now in a very significant moment of rethinking. How do we want to continue to expand? We're dreaming about the possibility of doing micro churches.
Mhm.
We're dreaming about continue to work with small groups. We are already working with small groups called, we call them heartbeats, latidos.
Mhm.
And because we believe we want to be heartbeats in the middle of the city
Mhm.
and provide that life.
Mhm.
So that's our dream.
Mhm. Wow, it's so encouraging because those who serve, like you serve, doing coaching on the European level, training and all that. But it's such an encouraging thing that all the people that are doing that kind of work are actually based in a local level. They're somewhere in their cities, in their countries, serving on the ground. So that's where you're serving on the ground in Madrid. Tell me a little bit about what is your role at M4 Europe, and yeah, why would you invest some of your time rather in only in the local church or just doing stuff in Madrid? What would make you want to serve Europe even beyond Europe? Because you've, I think, also been to a few other places outside of Europe connected with M4. So why invest in that?
Yes, thank you, Greg, for asking, and I'm glad you pointed to that because I wouldn't do it any other way. I have a strong conviction that you cannot give elsewhere what you are not being a practitioner of. What you are not uh, rolling up your sleeves and really actually doing it at your very intimate and local level.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a passion of mine, I think, to not only come alongside leaders that are planting churches, but also train others. And I think it's a very simple, quick, and direct way to multiply the effort. Um, yeah, together with my wife, we have been praying and thinking and wrestling through how to invest better our time and our energies, because as you grow older, it's not so much about time, it's more about those energies,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and how to
You're not
invest.
25 anymore.
That's right,
I say to
man.
myself now, like it's like, yeah.
That's right. So basically, instead of, if you ask me, even 8 or 10 years ago, I was probably, you know, involved in 7 different fronts, and right now I think I can narrow down to 4 or 5 fronts, of which 3 or 4 have to do with coaching,
Mm-hmm.
coaching church planters, maybe coaching our teammates within our local reality, coming alongside as a coach with church planters in Spain, but then also training and equipping and motivating other church planting coordinators in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a simple, clear, and direct way to multiply the effort, but also to focus that and say, how, Lord, how do you want to? And it's interesting because after we were praying and wrestling through that with my wife, and we came to this conclusion, I think focus is just important at this stage of life. Invitations, doors, opportunities continue to open in this same line. So I think that's why I'm loving it so much. It energizes me, and I just consider it and count it a privilege, Craig.
Give me just an example or one place that would stand out that's been really fun or something or different in serving with M4 Europe.
Man, that's a difficult one. Can I say 2?
You can say 2, yeah.
Now, the first one that comes to mind, I think it was going to Vinnytsia, Ukraine, with Nelutsu.
Mm-hmm.
And and part of the story, and part of why it was such a wonderful experience was because of that. It was not only Miguel coming on his own to Ukraine to help the Ukrainians and training them. I mean, there were so many levels going on in that trip.
Mm-hmm.
It was Chris Guess
Mm-hmm.
and Nelutsu. I flew into Romania, into Bucharest, And together with Chris and with Nelutsu, we drove to Ukraine via Odessa,
Mhm.
because we were going to take a vehicle to some of the pastors there and church planters there. But then we ended up in Vinnytsia, and we trained, I forget if it was 12 or 14
Mhm.
leaders on coaching skills. But it was so cool. The reason I was saying different levels coming on. I mean, Nelutsu was there, Chris Guest was there, who is also training by observation. So it was almost like a come and see, Craig,
Mhm.
Chris. Come and see. Chris basically was observing, but we did it together. We did it together, and he got it so much that the next training he's already following up with
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
So I think it was nations serving nations.
Mhm.
Romania coming alongside with Spain and pouring into what God is doing there in Ukraine, but then also training the trainers.
Mhm.
Chris coming along and Nelutsu, and then now they are following up. So
Mhm.
that was a really neat
Wow.
experience. The situation in Ukraine is
Mhm.
not
Right. This is during the
we
war.
were not in tourism,
Right. Yeah.
through and through. It was exactly
Uh-huh.
right in the middle of the war. This was a year and a half ago.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of situation.
Yeah. And the second one?
And the second one is South Africa. In
Mhm.
South Africa, it is basically we went through the whole training, a day and a half training on coaching. What is coaching, what is not. It's not about telling, it's not about advising, it's about listening, it's about drawing out what God has put in,
Mhm.
and just changing the entire paradigm.
Mhm.
And we went through and exercises, and there were so many questions throughout the day. And I can summarize it, Craig, in one sentence. I see Pastor Monambi, from the other side of the parking. It was after a whole day and a half of parking. Miguel, thank you he yells it from the other side. Miguel, thank you for the training on coaching. Where were you 25 years ago when I was starting my
Wow.
ministry? I just raised my hand. I said, thank you, Monambi, for that encouragement. And I just raised my hand and said, glory to God.
That is great.
Because it was such a sense of satisfaction that if it was such a paradigm shift, that he would have loved to have
Mhm.
those skills 25 years ago in his
Yeah.
ministry. So
Wow. Miguel, as we wrap up, I want to give you one chance to now speak directly to those who are listening to the podcast, who are watching online. Maybe they're church planter, maybe they're in coaching. I don't know who would be out there. What would you like to say to them? Take a minute, look in the camera, and just give a challenge or encouragement or whatever the Lord leads you to say.
thank you, Craig. Wow, what an opportunity. If I would say one thing, I'm 57 years old. I have been in ministry for almost 30 now, a little bit over 30 actually. And the one thing I am obsessed about, and I would pass on to you and I would encourage you, is to stay healthy. And when I say stay healthy, is not only eat well, do good exercise, but stay healthy in your soul, stay healthy in your mental health, stay healthy in your spiritual health. And may the Lord allow you to not only finish well, but finish strong. I have an obsession for spiritual health and for seeing and watching and cheering on healthy leaders. So that's my encouragement to you. Stay healthy and finish strong.
Wow. Miguel, thank you so much for your words and encouragement, your stories, and thank you for the work you're doing at M4 Europe, in Madrid, and all over Europe. Thank you so much for what you've been doing.
Thank you, Craig.
And thanks for being on the podcast.
It's a privilege.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that's the podcast for today. Thank you for watching. Miguel Castillo has been our guest from Spain. My name is Craig Hamer. I've been the host, and we'll see you next time.